Hey there. In this video, I'm going to show you how to protect your Liberty backend application with IBM Cloud App ID. Right. So to recap, IBM Cloud App ID is a service available on IBM Cloud that helps you to connect your applications to different identity providers and easily add user authentication and access control to your applications. So using App ID, you can protect those applications and you can also protect backend resources, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So the workflow we're going to implement is called a bearer token workflow. With this workflow, you do have a resource server, some kind of a backend, and you want that backend to be protected, right? So the entity that is trying to invoke your resource server, your backend, first of all, would need to obtain access token. Right, this is something I've demoed in previous videos. Right, you can look, you can check out the previous videos and understand how exactly you can do that in your applications. But the starting point for this is application server. Your client retrieves tokens from authorization server, that would be app ID, and then it makes requests to resource server with those tokens. Now, if tokens are not present or if they are not valid, right, for example, expired or tampered with, right, the request will be obviously rejected. Okay, you will see it in the video shortly, right? However, if token is valid, not expired, if all the validations were successful, you will retrieve your data. And the way it works, the token has to be submitted in the authorization header in a format bearer and the token content itself. Okay, so without further ado, let's see how this is implemented. So first of all, let's take a look at the configuration and the server configuration for Liberty Server that I am going to use. Okay, so I will walk you through this configuration to make sure everything you understand everything. So first of all, those are the features that are required to implement this functionality. You might use additional features, right? But those are the bare minimum that you need to implement this functionality. Now, it's important to note that some of those features might necessarily be installed on your Liberty server. Okay, so whenever you're going to start your server, you will get an error saying that this feature is not available. If you do encounter this error, what you can actually do is you can do install utility, install, and that's in your Liberty directory, and the name of your server, right? My server called default server. Okay, so I'm running this command. So essentially, this would install all the capabilities, right? All the features that you have declared in your server XML. And this will help you to make sure you got all of these features installed in your Liberty. So the next part is SSL definition. So in order to connect to authorization server, app ID in this case, Liberty would need to know which HTTP trust store to use, right? Which trust store to use for HTTPS connectivity, right? So in order to create this SSL object, right, we need to provide a key store reference and a trust store reference. So the key store reference, I'm just using the default key store, right, and the password for your default store key store, you can find it in, let me, give me a second, right, you can find it in user servers, default server in the server.env file under your default server or whatever the server is that you're using. The password is there, right? And for trust store, I've actually took liberty of exporting a digicert root certificate, okay, into a JKS file, and you will be able to get that file with this sample application. I will attach it to the video. Okay, so the way OpenID Connect client works is that it does require trust store. Okay, so you do have this Digistore trust store with the application, but do keep in mind that if you need to use a different URL, protect it with a different certificate, or if AppID decides to change the certificate, you will be required to import a new certificate here, right? But for simplicity, the sample will be bundled with the certificate. So now that I've defined my SSL environment, I need to define my OpenID Connect client. Okay, so first of all, I'm giving it a name, OIDC client, simple Liberty backend application, right? In order for it to actually propagate the information received from the token, right? I set this property inbound propagation to required. Okay, not two endpoints, the endpoint that will be used to obtain keys in order to validate the token. Those keys are required to validate the token is defined here, right? Issuer identifier, that is the identifier of my authorization server. Okay, and signature algorithm audiences SSL ref, right? Basically, those are the settings that I will need to define. So let's see, right? Where are you actually getting those settings? Okay, let's see. Okay, so in order to obtain those settings, you need to create an app-ID instance. I actually already created my app-ID instance, right? So if I go to applications, you will see that I already have this simple Liberty backend application. I need to take a look at the credentials of that application, and properties that I need to copy are, first of all, the JWKS endpoint URL, right? So that's going to be my auth server URL / public keys, right? Nope, wrong property. That's audience. I need to put it here in JW key endpoint / public keys. Okay, my issuer identifier is going to be the URL of my app-ID instance, right? And the audiences, so the default audience is the client ID. Okay, so you can just copy it. Okay, essentially by default, the token will be issued for the client ID. Okay, so I've configured my OpenID Connect client. Okay, and now it should be able to work. Now, if you look, the next part, that's where I'm defining my application. That's the application I'm going to protect, right? This is a simple Liberty backend application that I have in my IDE. I will use Maven to build it. You will see it in a moment, right? And here I've defined an application binding with a security role called my role. Okay, essentially that's something I will be using in my application. I do need to define it in server XML first in order to be able to use it, right? So that's exactly what I'm doing here, and I'm saying that it will apply to all authenticated users. So that's a custom role I've created because that's how OpenID Connect client works. That's what I need to define. So this is pretty much it for server configuration. Let's start the server, right? Let's do server run. Okay, so the server has started. Let's see, no error messages were displayed. Excellent. And now let's go to IDE. Okay, so this is my application. So this is a very, very simple application. Essentially, I have a single servlet here, right, called data servlet. It sits at, it's available at /API/data, and it returns a very simple JSON object with data 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Obviously, your backends are much more sophisticated, but this is good enough for an example, okay? Now, I can also look in my web XML file, and I can see that currently protected area, right? I have security constraints here, right? And protected area is defined as /API. So I will comment this out just to show you the unprotected servlet first, right? Before I protect it, and let's build it. Okay, so do note that I have a security role, my role used here in my web XML as well, right? That's the same role that I've previously defined in server XML, if you remember. Okay, and this is the way my application, right, knows about this role. So this was deployed. Okay, excellent. Let's see. I have a postman here, right? And I'm going to localhost /simple liberty backend application /API/data. Let's click send. And you can see that I actually got the response data 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so as expected. So if I go back to my application, this is exactly what I'm sending. Okay, cool. So now let's try to protect this API. I will go back to WebXML. I will remove the comment from here. So now /API is protected. I will rebuild my application. Okay, and if I go back to Postman and try to invoke this API again, so now I'm actually getting OpenID client failed the request with 401 unauthorized. So this is expected, right? And it says invalid token, check access token. So that's the www authenticate header I'm getting back. So this is the message we're getting because this API is now protected. So how do I get access to that API? In order to invoke that API, let's get back to the presentation for a second. I need to specify the access token. I need to retrieve the access token and put it on the request, right? If you remember this diagram, right, we're talking about this segment. This is the segment where application sends a request to protected resource. And in order to do that, the request needs to be supplied in authorization header. And right here, the protected resource, OIDC client in this case, will validate that token, and it will either grant or deny access. So currently, as you can obviously see, the access is being denied. Let's see how we can get access to that API again. So here, right, I've already obtained an access token. Okay, this is an access token I retrieved previously. I will copy it. Okay, and I'm going back to my API, right? And I'm specifying a request header here, authorization, right? That's the header we expect to see, bearer, and the value of this token. Okay, so now if I click send, I'm getting my data again. If I remove this authorization header, I'm getting a failure. If I send this token, it works. If I tamper with token, for example, right, if I try to modify it, right, it will fail again. So this is a very simple way to protect your applications, right? Let's make sure it works again. Okay, let me paste it again. Okay, now I'm getting the data back. Okay, so basically with a single line of configuration, right, plus your server XML, you can easily protect your applications and you can easily protect any kind of backend from unauthorized access. So I think that would be it for this time, and till next time.